Hey folks, this is Rhykker, and set your sarcasm detectors to maximum, because today we're reacting to a video on why Diablo 4 players will hate upcoming action RPG Last Epoch, which releases next week, February 21st. I just got back from my Euro trip, and my friends showed me this video, and I just knew I had to share it with you folks. If you don't know much about Last Epoch, then this should sell you on why it's such a promising game. And if you are familiar with Last Epoch, then this is just a really funny, clever video that compares some features from Diablo 4 with Last Epoch. The original video was made by Frosty LaRue, link to that to watch in full in the description below. Here we're going to be just reacting to certain segments, because I really want you to watch the whole thing for yourselves. So let's dive on in.
Diablo 4 superfans, be warned. On February 21st, Last Epoch will officially launch, and you are going to hate it. This video is for us Diablo 4 enthusiasts who believe Diablo 4 is the perfect ARPG in every way, with absolutely no issues. The next thing I absolutely despise about Last Epoch is its skill trees. Yes, I said skill trees, meaning more than one. They have a passive skill tree, then a whole complete skill tree for every single skill in the game. Again, what an absolutely stupid idea and a waste of time. Let me show you an example side by side using Fireball.
I've been saying for years that Last Epoch has my favorite active skill system of any action RPG ever, to the point that I literally feel this is the template that should be used for all ARPGs moving forward, and it honestly boggles my mind that no other company has stolen this idea and released a game before Last Epoch's full release that just capitalizes on this, which is great for the Last Epoch team. Every single skill has its own skill tree. We are capturing two, what I feel to be very key aspects of what we enjoy in ARPGs with regards to, one, progression systems. All the way back to the Diablo 2 days, we liked putting skill points into things. Here's a skill. You level up, you put another point into it, it gets stronger. Hooray, that's great. Then you take the rune system of Diablo 3, where, oh, I can select a rune to customize this skill in some way. Oh, all of a sudden my one fireball shoots two fireballs. Hey, cool, maybe they're weaker, but, you know, there's some strategic play there. This combines both of those things, where you have some nodes that are just, you know, either increasing the attack speed or the damage or what have you, and then other nodes that are complete game changers that are going to modify the skill in a really exciting way. And you can argue that, well, the Diablo 4 skill tree kind of does that too. True, you can put some points into the base skill, and then you can kind of pick between two options on how you want it to evolve, but they're not gameplay changing options. They're changing some minor things about maybe how the damage is dealt, so you could have build options around that. But then we're going to see the comparison to the Last Epoch skill tree. Oh, I forgot to mention the third thing as well that we like is actually progressing through a tree, right? You like having your branching paths, and so it's not just about allocating the skill points and allocating the rune selections. It's about pathing your way, selecting what path you're going to take through the tree to optimize. Oh, okay, like I want to get that, and I don't really care about this or that, but let me see. It cost me fewer points to navigate through this branch to get to that, so maybe how can I work that into my build? It's just so many more meaningful choices to be made. And let's just have him run out this full example here.
On the left, we have the Giga Chad Diablo 4's Fireball and its skill tree section. So freaking clean. And let's look at our options here. We can either do more damage with Fireball, or over here, we can do more crit damage with Fireball. Thank you, Blue.
So, the fact that there's just two options, you know, isn't by itself terrible, but the options aren't like super meaningfully different apart from very granular, high-level build planning. The options aren't exciting. It's not like launch two fireballs. Ooh, cool. Like that's a really big, immediately obvious choice to everyone. Or like, you know, turn it into an ice ball, for instance. For the most part, Diablo moves these more meaningful, significant things onto items, aspects, unique items, that sort of thing. And when it does those things, it's great, but it also still has a lot of those less exciting, less impactful affixes or choices to make. And in my opinion, it needs to do more of the exciting things, which we're going to see examples with right now in Last Epoch.
Blizzard for giving us what we want. Meaningful, game-changing choices in a skill tree. Now let's look over here at this abomination of a skill tree for Last Epoch's Fireball. The options we have to augment Fireball here are turning it into an ability where we can shoot multiple fireballs in a cone, or turn it into a plasma ball that does more damage, or adds an explosion, or homing feature, or turning it into a flamethrower. And we can even combine these together and have a plasma flamethrower that explodes. I gotta stop. I'm getting too overwhelmed from all these options. I think you can all see what a major waste of time all these options are.
And this is for every single skill in the game, getting its own different skill tree. It's not always that same layout. Just a huge amount of work that went into this by an indie team. It's their first game, and they're just knocking it out of the park here.
Some of the most meaningful moments I've ever had in Diablo were just me staring at my items in my stash, or even inventory, deciding if I should keep a weapon with more damage to healthy enemies, or another weapon with more damage to slowed enemies. You know what? This brings me to my next point on why us Diablo 4 superfans will absolutely hate Last Epoch. And that's because they have a loot filter. What? Why would you want to pick up less loot? And why would I...
Now, I've said for a long time, loot filters are a solution to a problem. They're a very effective solution to that problem. And Last Epoch's loot filter is arguably one of the best, if not the best loot filter that's ever been implemented into a game. I personally would rather that the problem was addressed at the source rather than add a solution to that problem. But as far as fixing the problem goes, loot filter is an elegant solution. And what that problem is, what that underlying problem is that too much stuff drops that I don't care about, right? You look at Path of Exile, for instance. Endgame Path of Exile is literally unplayable without a loot filter. There is so much stuff dropping on screen. You cannot parse through it all. You need to use a loot filter to filter away all the stuff that you don't care about. Now, so far, no game has been able to give an actual solution to the core problem. So until that happens, then it is perfectly acceptable to have loot filters. I don't believe loot filters ought to be a mandatory part of an ARPG, but once we reach that point where it is a problem that too much stuff is dropping that we don't care about, then we do need loot filters. And Diablo 4 is at a point where we do need loot filters. Maybe that's going to change with Itemization 2.0, but for now, yes, loot filters are needed. And just to clarify for anyone who may not understand what a loot filter is, to be more explicit, a loot filter is something customizable that will filter out loot drops that you selectively don't care about. So the loot still drops, but if it's some like white item or a blue item and you just say, I don't want to ever see blue or white items, the item drops, but you don't see it. Out of sight, out of mind. And it can become more granular where you can actually select specific affixes that you do or don't care about. So let's say you only want to see rings that have crit chance on them. Then if a ring drops and it doesn't have crit chance, you don't have to see that.
I want to only see items I need. Do they think we're not smart enough to make loot decisions on our own? No, that can't be it. Us Diablo 4 purists are the smartest out of any ARPG player out there. We don't need to be able to filter out white and blue items. We don't need to be able to color grade gear that drops based on having stats like plus minion damage. They don't even know how much.
That's another thing that you can do with Last Epoch's loot filter is customize the colors of what drops. So for instance, in Diablo 4, I don't care about blue items ever, but the freaking potions are blue. So now I have to be looking, anytime a blue item drops, I have to be scanning it. I have to be spending that mental energy to look at it just a moment to ensure I'm not leaving potions on the ground or whatever they're called. With Last Epoch's loot filter, you'd be able to say, okay, potions, make them purple, make them whatever other color that you personally want to see certain loot colored in a different way.
How much fun we have spending countless minutes sorting through a whole inventory of items, carefully looking at all the stats to see what may be an upgrade after every dungeon run. Oh my god, I'm getting antsy. All this talk about a full inventory of yellow items is really making me want to stop making this video right now and get back to my perfect Diablo 4. But
I know a lot of people at Endgame D4 reach a point where they just say, I can't do this anymore. And they just stop picking up yellow items. And they only pick up legendaries and uniques. Even though a yellow item could be the perfect base to make your perfect best in slot legendary by imprinting an affix onto it. I know a lot of people that they just reach a point of exhaustion and they don't bother anymore. Now again, in fairness to Diablo 4, Loot 2.0, the big itemization rework that is, as far as we were last told, was coming in Season 4, ought to address a lot of this stuff. So fingers crossed for that.
But before I do, I have 2 more reasons why you're going to hate Last Epoch. One of which is the crafting system. In our exquisite game, Diablo 4, we can choose one stat to re-roll where it gives you a random new stat. Last Epoch has so many
Last Epoch has an excellent crafting system. So, there's nothing, I don't think there's anything wrong with D4's current crafting system. It's just, there's not much to it, right? But like what we do have isn't bad. It would be nice to have more crafting options. I mean, then again, you know, some people do want more crafting in the game, some people don't, but for those who do want crafting, and I do believe crafting is a really integral part of an ARPG that you'll want to invest a lot of time into. I think we've progressed over the years to that. We sort of had crafting in a way with Diablo 2. You can argue that things like rune words were a form of a crafting system. Then you had actual crafting, you know, through the cube as well, transmuting things. I like when a crafting system sort of exists in a way that if you just want to be a super casual player, you can just play the game and not fuss over the intricacies of crafting, just rely on drops, and that's cool. But if you want to get more into the nitty gritty with the crafting, with farming specific things to tailor your items, those options are there for you to retain those players that are seeking that additional depth there. And again, I think Last Epoch has a system that is rather clean to understand. There's maybe a little bit too many options that can overwhelm a new player right away, but just the basis of how it works is very clean and is intuitive and simple enough to grasp. It's when you get into all the various materials that you can start to apply that things maybe get a bit more complicated, but at its core, basically, every item that drops has a certain number of affixes that you can have on it. And if its affixes aren't all full, if there's an empty slot or more empty slots, you can add more affixes. So now all of a sudden, like a white item isn't going to have as many affixes, so there's a bunch of empty spots. You can use that as a nice base to craft on. Or, you know, here's a yellow item, it only has one empty spot, and so I'm going to want to put my perfect affix roll onto that. Then you can be breaking down items, and it's going to yank off affixes from those items, and that's how you build up your pool of affixes to imprint onto items. So here's this item that maybe I've outgrown its base damage, but it has a really good affix on it. So I'm going to break it down to take that affix, and now I found a new sword, and I'm going to slap that affix onto my new weapon. In a way, it's similar to Diablo 4's aspect system, except with the innate affixes and with a lot more customization and nuance and depth to how you go about it. Also, you're not cluttering up your inventory with all of these items, you just break them down and they get gobbled up into an interface that consumes 0 space. You can have infinite amounts of all of these affixes. Players who learn and master the crafting system will be well rewarded with an easier time leveling up and an easier time as well getting your best in slot and game gear.
Options, I'm only going to tell you a few of my favorites. I mean least favorites. The first is being able to put the exact stat you want onto a piece of gear. You want fire damage? You can add fire damage. You can transform an item into a unique or set item. Yes, there are sets in the game. How ridiculous. This last part about crafting, I'm sure you will all hate. And that's the ability to craft a powerful weapon on your high-level character and give it to your low-level character to make them completely overpowered and able to breeze through the early game, destroying everything in sight. How silly. Don't they know killing hordes of enemies super fast is not fun at all? Give me my 4 damage Diablo 4 druid any day, because
as an altaholic, something that I always liked in ARPGs was being able to take my high-level character and either farm or create gear for a fresh alt to make his leveling journey so much easier. And I feel that Diablo 4 does not nearly give us as many tools to do that. There's so many things that are like, okay, well, you know, this item now that's going to drop for your level 100 character, it's minimum level like 80 or something. And at that point, it's like, well, I want to skip the part where I'm super low level. I want to feel like an absolute god demolishing things because I'm able to bring this GG endgame gear onto my really low level characters. And not to say that every item ought to do that, but like at least there should be some really good like low level gear that I ought to be able to bring over from my high level character, where I can put effort, right? It's not like, oh, well, it makes the game too easy. I'm putting the effort in. I'm putting the effort in on my level 100 character. I've earned the right to level up more rapidly on a new character. If there's no trading in the game, why am I farming up gear if I can't do anything with it? If I can at least give it to my alts and boost them through the game, it feels good.
We are real gamers. Now for my final and possibly most despised reason us Diablo 4 devotees will hate Last Epoch and its endgame. They have 3 endgame activities. The first being dungeons, where you'll be able to target farm rewards and have varying levels of difficulty. Then they have the Monolith of Fate, which has so much depth to it, but I'm going to keep things short because I really...
The Monolith of Fate. All right. I use the term meta progression system. What is a progression system in a game? A progression system, in my definition, is a system that you are progressing through that increases the power of your character. So a skill tree is a progression system. Your paragon nodes, those are progression systems. Just leveling up your character is a progression system, right? A meta progression system is something in which you are progressing a game system that is not directly tied to your character power. So you have the Atlas in Path of Exile, you have the Monolith in Last Epoch, and I feel like this has become an intrinsic part of giving us some greater meaning and significance to continuing to farm endlessly once you're at the end game, right? When you're doing a dungeon in Diablo 4, there's no greater purpose to it. It's just a means to an end. It's a means to get more XP, to get more loot, and to level up your glyphs. But there's no greater context. Why do this dungeon over that dungeon? There's no real choices to make over maybe the affixes, like I don't care for that affix, I don't care for that affix, but it has no greater meaning in the grand scheme of things. Whereas with the Monolith of Fate, with mapping in Path of Exile, you are, with every dungeon you're doing, progressing towards some greater goal. And you see, you have like choices to make, branching paths, depending on which of these maps you decide to run. It's going to give different rewards, and you are progressing your timeline towards greater difficulty. Every node here, I believe you unlock this big boss fight to do to continue forward. So with every dungeon you're running, you feel like you're making some meaningful progress towards a greater goal. I believe we absolutely need a meta progression system in Diablo 4. And I've been saying this since the Diablo 3 days, right? You're just running GRs endlessly, Greater Rifts endlessly. The only progression is that you're unlocking the next tier of Greater Rift, but it's not enough. Give some context, give some purpose to us for running these GRs, or now with D4, with running the dungeons.
Really got to get to my inventory full of yellows. It consists of a huge branching mapping system with endgame rewards, modifiers, and bosses, with the challenge and rewards increasing with its difficulty the further you go. There's a whole lot more to monoliths, but who wants to go over the endgame systems to that extent?
I do, and I'll probably make another video about this soon.
Then finally, we have the arena. There are 2 modes. One is the Arena of Champions, with a set number of waves followed by a boss. Each wave, you can increase the difficulty with a modifier which increases your reward at the end. Then there is the Endless Arena. And here's where I feel the developers of Last Epoch are either aliens or working for the Illuminati, because this Endless Arena has a ladder system, a fully functional, active ladder system. Guys, Last Epoch is a small company, so considering it is taking Blizzard months to launch a ladder system, and this game will have it on launch, I am sure there is either some supernatural or future technology at play here, and we should just not trust it.
Now, the arena is something that is so elegantly simple, where it's just waves of enemies come at you. You beat the wave, you move on to the next wave, right? Like, this is not a new or novel idea, but it's simple, it's elegant, it does the job. It provides different gameplay from running maps or dungeons. So you're getting a new / a different endgame experience that just distills the gameplay down to its most pure form, where you're, I mean, you don't have to stand in a single spot, but you could, and enemies come at you, and that could potentially modify your tactics a bit, right? Like some builds might do better in the arena than in going through a map. So you're actually managing to deliver a substantially different gameplay experience in, again, one of the simplest ideas possible. And you're tying a ladder into that as well, because it just makes sense, right? How many waves can I get through? I made it to wave 86. How about you? Well, now you can just display it for everyone to see. It's another simple idea that's not like proprietary to anything. It's something that could be easily added to any game. Diablo 3 even added a form of this. Technically, it used to have a form of this. The realm of trials, which would determine what GR key you got, that was bad implementation because we hated having to do that in order to unlock a GR key, a Greater Rift key. But the gameplay was there. You stand around and waves of monsters come at you. So then they brought it back in a much better form, in the form of echoing nightmares, where now, okay, I want to get past different levels, and that's a lot of fun. And again, it's different gameplay, and what we see is different builds perform better in these kinds of arenas with waves of enemies. Why? Because it's substantially different gameplay. When you get to be stationary versus you have to be navigating through a dungeon, you are now enabling different metas, because now all of a sudden, well, if I have to lay down turrets, if I have to lay down ground effects, now my build is stronger because the enemies are all coming to me in big density. So for Diablo 4, let's talk about Abattoir of Zaeith, for instance. So in D4, you have dungeons. Then you have Nightmare dungeons, which are just super dungeons. They're more difficult, but it's the same gameplay. Then you have Abattoir of Zaeith, which is just super duper dungeons, same gameplay. At its core, you're still just going through a map and killing enemies. And sure, you can argue, well, I mean, all ARPG gameplay can be distilled down to you're going around killing enemies. But again, just the difference in an arena versus navigating a dungeon to just get to the boss at the end, those are substantially different forms of gameplay, which is why I do have hope for the upcoming Gauntlet of Diablo 4. It does sound like you're still going through a dungeon killing enemies, but it seems there's more meaningful choices to be made there. I guess we'll see in play how it pans out, but the fact that there's a timer, the fact that you're collecting points more so than just wanting to kill monsters, the fact that the boss spawns right at the start, that it'll definitely feel different from Abattoir of Zaeith, at least. So I'm hoping that's going to provide substantially different gameplay. It's something that I'm actually interested to, even though I don't care about leaderboards, I'm interested in just to experience if the gameplay loop feels different enough. And again, I highly suspect that the Gauntlet's going to release the day before Last Epoch does.
Okay, so those of you who are still here, I assume you actually are playing or will play Last Epoch on February 21st. If so, then subscribe to my channel, because I am too. And I do plan on making more videos on this game. Have a good one. Bye.
Again, Frosty LaRue, folks, go check out his full video. Again, I cut out some sections here. There's some real gems in there as well, where he talks about things like monetization and stash tabs. So go give his full video a watch. And sign off in the comments with your thoughts on Last Epoch. Are you looking forward to this game? Or do you think it's not for you? Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. And subscribe to join Rhykkers Raiders for more ARPG content.